Hello everybody, and welcome to the third and final part of my layout tour here at Melchester Model Railway. In part 2 I looked at the engine shed area in some detail, and then we followed the tight curve of the main line and branch line as it transitioned into a countryside area where the lines are flanked by farmland and the odd lonely cottage. Part 2 ended with a look at the country church and a stroll around the vicarage garden, where you can see the vicar admiring his prized delphiniums, having just won first prize in the Melchester Horticultural Society flower show. Now in part 3 we enter the second station on the layout, a small country station not important enough to serve the main lines, but serving the branch line with its own bay platform and goods siding. You can see I've created a little more distance between the two main lines on the right and the branch on the left by landscaping the ground between them with grass and weeds to help emphasise the separation. There is a small embankment on the right with not much room for anything other than some fencing and telegraph poles. The retaining wall at the station entrance pushes back the embankment and allows space for the church and vicarage. This is simply made from Metcalfe stone card, and I added 5 sloping stone strengthening pillars to add architectural detail and hopefully make it look more feasible as a functioning structure. Here is a view from the area above the retaining wall, with an additional removable back scene in place, which I sometimes use just for filming. The signal box on the left oversees the crossover from the branch line to the main line, the points for the bay platform and goods siding, as well as the reverse loop which traverses the operating well and enables me to turn locomotives and indeed entire trains around, which is why there is no turntable on my layout. Here is Stephenson's rocket rounding the radius 1 curve onto the reversing loop. It emerges just to the west of platform 1 at Melchester Station. The single island platform is, like the main station at Melchester, of a Metcalfe card kit construction. It will hold a 4-coach train or 3 coaches in the bay platform. The main station building is again by Metcalfe, and I've added extra detailing in the form of gutters and drain pipes, as well as working swan neck lamp brackets, but some of the chimney stacks are still awaiting their pots. Further along the platform is this small resin waiting shelter, produced by Bachmann. It's based on the one at Shillingston, which was not a million miles away from Melchester, or real name Salisbury. It was on the Somerset and Dorset line. At the entrance to the goods yard is this Southern Railway loading gauge, typically made of concrete like so many other items made by the Southern Railway. It was found in goods yards, sheds and warehouses right across the system, and was there to ensure that bulky goods loads in wagons do not project beyond specific dimensions. I sometimes pass the remains of such a loading gauge whilst walking the route of the Meon Valley Railway. This particular one is located at the former site of the Mislingford goods yard. As the goods siding separates from the bay platform, a small water tower stands between them, serving both tracks. This Pico model has been available for many decades. A cobbled hard standing allows for the loading and unloading of goods, and as the embankment against the back scene descends, a goods store sits at the base of the slope. These provender goods stores were more or less unique to the steam railway. They were used by traders to store animal feed, corn, fresh fruit and vegetables, and other goods, and like granaries were raised off the ground to prevent damp and rodents. These humble buildings were ideal for the single wagon businesses that they served. Utilitarian to a fault, the earliest examples were made of wood and corrugated iron, like this model. In the 1950s, prefabricated concrete ones started to be produced. Against the back wall of the yard sits a coal stave, as used by local coal merchants for the delivery of coal, and the entrance to the yard is through these gates and down a gentle slope. Beyond the environs of the goods yard sits this row of low-relief stone cottages, just opposite the station building. I've added a few extra details such as drain pipes and some internal lighting, and to join the pairs of cottages together I created a little arched alleyway that would lead through to the back gardens. They are fronted by a set of iron railings, with stairs that descend to street level. One street lamp provides a bit of extra light at night. The station ends where a large chimney breast juts into the room, causing a bottleneck situation that doesn't allow much room for either track or scenery. The best solution, I thought, would be to have a drop-down baseboard which would allow me to construct a viaduct and an adjacent girder bridge, providing some visual interest in what otherwise might have been a rather uninteresting section. The viaduct carries the two main lines, and a girder bridge carries the branch line across the valley. Here I'm testing the newly built viaduct for the first time, where the track circuit is not yet complete. When I became interested in model railways again after a 20-year gap, I was very pleased to discover the existence of Metcalfe card kits, which were a huge leap forward from the super quick ones I'd known previously. The viaduct kit was the first item that I constructed for the layout, and I had to modify it to make it higher, so it really was in at the deep end where Metcalfe kits are concerned. With the landscaping complete, the viaduct is now an interesting feature on the layout. The grass is a static grass application, as it is elsewhere on the layout, and I've added a few trees and a bit of ivy. A small brook runs beneath it, which is a watering spot for the occasional horse or pony. Dan even set up home there once in a disused railway carriage.
Hiya there, Dan. Dan, get out of bed this minute.
Much of the inspiration for featuring a brick-built viaduct on my layout came from my visits to Hockley Viaduct near Winchester. It used to carry the Didcot, Newbury and Southampton Railway across the water meadows there. If you'd like to see the film I made about it, please click on one of the links. Using some fairly basic video editing, I was able to turn my 8-arch span viaduct into a 33-span one and replicate the passage of City of Truro, which used to be a regular on the line. As we come off the viaduct, a large generous curve commences as we approach the other end of the layout. The second of two concrete line-side huts sits by the side of the main line, and I gave this corner over entirely to scenery, building a long crescent of terraced house backs that sit at the top of a grassy incline. The backs of houses are perhaps one of the most common sights from a moving train, and I really wanted to model a long row of them, as they create such a semi-suburban atmosphere appropriate for a 1950s railway. This atmosphere is enhanced by the lights that come from individual house windows, and behind the facade you can see the amount of wiring required. The houses are one of my favourite products from Metcalfe, but like many of their brick-based buildings, I do find it quite important to tone down the uniform appearance of the brickwork with some weathering. I joined them all together in a crescent and added strips of extra brick and roof tiles to cover up the gaps. Each house has a small backyard, and I've added guttering, and a few of them even have porch lights. Here Mrs. Mop scrubs a step, whilst the boy next door is watching trains from an upstairs window. The only house with any garden to speak of is the one at the very end, with just a small triangle of patchy grass. In this sequence for a future video, the Smith family are leaving their house to go on holiday. They are making their way to the station to catch the Atlantic Coast Express. Mrs. Parker from number 27 has spotted them and has come out to ask them where they're off to.
Where are you off to then with all your family? You've got all your baggage there. Are you going on a day trip? Are you going on holiday? Oh, you're going on holiday, are you? Oh, where are you off to on your holiday? Oh, you're going to Bournemouth. Oh, Bournemouth, that's lovely at this time of year, isn't it? Oh, yes, I envy you going along the beach. Yes, you'll be able to build sandcastles and go for a paddle in the sea. Oh, what could be
This
better?
railway billboard is a recent addition, which I cobbled together from scraps of balsa wood. Workmen are in the process of sticking up an Atlantic Coast Express poster. A disused Anderson shelter, a leftover from the war, is now overgrown and no doubt used by local children as a den. A broken fence post and worn path leading to it rather suggest as much. The terrain is mostly grassy scrubland, with trees kept to a minimum. just 3 in total, with this one sitting to one side. As we reach the opposite end of the layout, the curve of the line is far more generous than at the other end. This is so that I could build sidings on the inside curve, whereas at the other end of the layout, the engine shed and its other associated sidings are on the outside curve. This allowed me space to fit the largest building on my model railway, the brewery. From street level outside the factory gates, its chimney and buildings loom up into the sky. It consists of 4 buildings, 2 connected buildings forming the brewery, an administration office and boiler house with its imposing chimney. I made a separate video entirely about the brewery and how it works. If you'd like to see that, please click on one of the links now. I've added lots of figures, flatbed lorries and forklift trucks to give the scene a busy working feel, as well of course stacks of barrels and sacks of grain being loaded and unloaded. The brewery has its own private siding. You can just see the rails there through the tarmac, as well as their own privately owned shunting locomotive, Queen Anne, who is kept very busy. This tiny shunter is kept in the stub of the siding, right up against the brewery walls. Those tall Victorian brick-built walls extend around the entire perimeter of the brewery. Here is a view not often or easily filmed. In the spare corner opposite to the terraced houses is more housing, except this time I used Bachmann's low-relief Victorian tenements. These resin models required very little in the way of extra detailing, other than adding lighting and, in some of the windows, some curtains. I don't know if they're based on any particular prototype, but it always struck me that they bore a striking resemblance to the tenements that can be seen from the platforms at Paddington Station. They sit on slightly elevated land, which cuts down to the railway lines with a low retaining wall. The view from the upper windows must provide a great location for watching trains. Viewed from elsewhere on the layout, the tenements are quite an imposing structure on the skyline. Opposite the tenement buildings and on the inside of the curve sits Melchester goods shed and yard. In addition to the siding that runs into the brewery, there are two sidings in a yard that is paved over to make it easy for workmen and road vehicles to operate. There is also a goods shed where vans can easily be loaded and unloaded under cover. This aerial view gives a better idea of the track plan. The brewery siding passes through the paved goods yard, and you can see the two sidings nearest the main line, but fenced off for safety. A set of points at some coal staiths allow wagons from the brewery to bypass the goods shed, which may be occupied. A further siding beyond the goods shed allows for further unloading, storage, or often stabling of locomotives awaiting their next goods turn. Eventually all these lines converge and rejoin the main line at a point just to the east of the Platform 1 at Melchester Station. Two of the sidings end just before the boiler house with its tall chimney. Some yard detritus has collected here, and a man is busy breaking up old pallets and burning them. Every goods yard needs a yard crane. This is a Bachmann model, although it isn't fixed down, so I can relocate it if need be, which is useful when taking photographs or filming. The yard is equipped with tall working double yard lamps, one of which is just visible now. As the shunter passes through the yard, a coal staith is located for coal merchants' use, and here the points allow for the goods shed to be bypassed, as I mentioned earlier. This is especially useful as goods trains entering the shed can have their locomotives run around without being left stranded. Use of coal was widespread for heating houses in Britain. Coal staiths were a common feature in goods yards, and here you can see a separate coal office. As coal is transferred from a wagon, is bagged and weighed before being transferred to a road vehicle for delivery to domestic properties for heating. The paved surface of the goods yard is very beneficial in allowing road vehicles the ability to use the yard. Lorries and other flatbed wagons can be positioned next to box vans to enable the easy transfer of goods. A goods yard like this, combined with the smaller one at the country station, allows for a lot of operational interest. The entrance to the goods yard itself is through these wooden gates, which I used from a level crossing kit. Of course, the main feature of the goods yard is the goods shed. This again is a Metcalfe model. The merchandise that was not in full wagon loads was dealt with here. The working area inside the goods shed would often be divided up into sectors allocated to various destinations, both on the railway system and for delivery to the community at large. To assist movement of heavier items, cranes were often a feature, either inside or outside on the platform, such as this one. Usually a simple hand-operated crane, capable of lifting about 1 ton. The goods office was often attached to the shed. The railway generated mountains of paperwork for the goods staff, with all its invoices, delivery notes, demurrage registers and the like. Nothing was ever knowingly destroyed. Here the yard foreman surveys the yard from the top of the steps. I've added a few extra details such as the BR goods office sign, railings at the top of the steps, and drain pipes are a great way of disguising the corners on Metcalfe card kit buildings. Beyond the main goods shed, I used another kit to create a double-length, low-relief goods shed. The opening that would normally be on the road side, I switched to rail side to create a usable loading bay. The brewery, goods yard and main lines don't leave much space for scenery, but opposite the goods yard a narrow strip of land descends down from the tenement buildings. This is given over for the use of allotments. The noisy hustle and bustle of the busy railway yard is contrasted with the sedate pace of growing veg. These bean poles are made from cocktail sticks. The vegetables themselves are made from plastic and come from the bush range, as does the odd wild flower that can be seen sprouting up here and there. These two gardeners are hard at work, one with a fork and the other with a wheelbarrow, no doubt about to get ready to collect some of the fine cauliflower that's growing in the allotment. Further down the slope are some glass houses, sheds and cold frames. There's a nice array of tomatoes and flowers growing in this glass house. On this gentle slope, a man is tilling the soil. In the background you can see the third of 3 signal boxes on Melchester. This is Melchester East signal box. It sits at Cabbage Patch Junction, the point at long last where the branch line finally separates from the main line, albeit for a short while, but enough for me to justify calling the third line the branch line. This goods train is coming off the branch to join the main line, whilst a 2 bill is about to pass on the main line, having just left platform 1 at Melchester. The signal box is a Hornby product, and I've named it Melchester East. We saw Melchester West in part 1. I've added point rodding and an interior, which you can just make out through the window. Next to the signal box, I've recently added a substation. This is a Bachmann product, which I added to provide power for my Southern Electric locomotives and multiple units, although you'll notice there is in fact no third rail. As the branch and main line diverge at Cabbage Patch Junction, The main lines take a gentle curve in the approach to Melchester Station. The line narrows as it passes the backs of buildings between two arched retaining walls. This is also the location where the lines forming the goods yard converge and join the main line. Brick arches are a Wills kit which require cutting and painting, a very useful product. The main lines re-enter Melchester Station at platforms 1 and 2. Although we're back at Melchester Station building where this tour began in part 1, it's not quite the end yet. The backs of the buildings you can see are the rear of Melchester High Street, and we've yet to look at that. First though, let's watch these two trains arriving and departing in the rain. When the branch line diverges from the main line at Cabbage Patch Junction, it immediately crosses this girder bridge across Station Road, and then onto a second smaller viaduct which carries the single line above Melchester High Street with all its shops, pubs and cinema. I was able to achieve this by having a baseboard with two different levels, which you can see here. Station Road is the lower level and the trackbed at the higher. Melchester High Street is built on an incline as the road rises to meet the level of the station building. The single-track branch line emerges between these two buildings from the Metcalfe range. I've added lighting and interior details. Somebody on the first floor is playing a grand piano, and on the top floor you can make out a bookcase. The girder bridge carries the line over Station Road. It then continues along the 5-arched viaduct, which I built using a Wills kit. The spaces below the arches are occupied by various light industrial outfits. Nestled in a corner on the other side of the bridge is the Duke of York pub. As these buildings are very close to the observer, I've added extra details such as window sills, guttering, interiors with lighting, as well as replacing the original card roofs with Will's plastic sheet roofs. I've also added decorative chimney pots to the stacks. Here a lonely figure looks out from a window, another great place to watch trains from. Of a Thursday evening, after brass band practice, the Duke of York can become quite a lively place. Station Road makes a sharp turn to the left and begins its gradual ascent up to the station. Here you can see the other side of the viaduct, with the arches bricked in. The one-way system allows vehicles to drive up to the station, deposit and collect passengers, before returning down the other side. There is space for parking in the middle of the road, as this banana van is about to do as it delivers fruit to the Juicy Pear greengrocer. The terraced buildings on the High Street had to be staggered due to building on an incline. Also, due to an extreme lack of space, I had to use low-relief buildings. These are a mixture of Metcalfe and Bachmann buildings. As you can see here, low relief enabled me to build a high street, but taking up very minimal space. This optical trickery works because I would only ever film from one of two positions. The first showing the front of the high street as viewed from the branch line, and the other showing the backs. As you can see, viewed from the mainline side, the tracks appear to be passing the backs of buildings. I would never film from this position, for example, which would rather give the game away. This shop, as viewed from beneath the bridge, is at the bottom of the High Street next to the Duke of York. It's a clock and watch shop. A lady is admiring a timepiece in the window. Arkwright's General Stores, next door, is open all hours. However, Granville's bicycle isn't there, so he must be out on his rounds. But it looks as if Nurse Gladys is paying a visit. A small flight of steps behind the pillar box takes the pedestrian up to a terrace fronted with railings. This is the Empire Cinema, flanked on either side by a bookshop and a tobacconist's. I've added some lighting and interior details, such as a grand staircase. My favourite film, The Lady Killers, has been showing here for at least the last 10 years. But a recent change of film to the Titfield Thunderbolt attracted a large queue.
This is it, Dolly.
Oh, Sam, one's first sermon all over again.
You can see that as the street rises, the buildings get shorter. So 4-storey buildings become 3, and then eventually 2 stories right at the very top of the street. Next to the Empire is the second of 2 pubs in the High Street, the Lamb and Flag. Metcalfe low-relief models give way to Bachmann resin ones at this point. Next door to the pub is the Juicy Pear greengrocers, a nice model with a canopy and an outside display of fruit and veg. In the middle of this trio of little shops is the Fruity Buns Bakery. Somebody at Bachmann obviously has a sense of humour. And finally a very fine fish and chip shop, a favourite of the Fat Controller, who often pops across from the station for his lunch. A clock tower stands in the centre of the High Street, on a glorified traffic island formed by the one-way road system. There is a covered seating area and cars are also able to park. The brass band often perform here, and at Christmas it's the location for a splendid tree. That brings us full circle back to the main station building at Melchester, where I began part 1 of this layout tour. I worked out that in real life one full lap of this layout would equate to a half a mile in real life. I hope you've enjoyed seeing my layout in detail, and if you like what you've seen, please do check out some of my other videos. Anyway, until next time, it just remains for me to say thanks for watching and bye for now.